And then I became a business builder. And in between, I would take breaks and go back and be a professor for a little while. But I built 16 sustainable businesses that are doing something today, the ones that have survived anyway, the 12 that have survived, are doing something today to mitigate and remediate climate change. And that's something I'm really proud of, is building those businesses.
10 seconds.
Actionably doing something to make climate change better. I look forward to getting to know all of you tonight.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you all for being here and thank you for your engagement during this process. My name is John Gonsalves. I'm a two-term city councilman representing the East Side and downtown in the city of Providence. And my story is very similar to the people who live in Rhode Island. I grew up in poverty to a single-parent household, and the struggle that so many people face in Rhode Island isn't theoretical to me. The reason why I'm in this fight is because so many people are struggling. People are worried about the cost of living. They're worried about housing. They're worried about reproductive rights. They're worried about our climate crisis. We need a fierce advocate at the federal level who can get the job done. And it's exactly what I've done as a local legislator, having been the lead sponsor on over 70 pieces of past legislation. But the other piece that I want to share, which is critically important, is that I'm a teacher. So when we think about standing up to our gun lobby, when we think about standing up for the issues that really matter for our children, families, and seniors, I encourage you to vote for a teacher to Congress. Thank you all for being here.
Buenas noches. My name is Sandra Cano. I'm a state senator from the city of Pawtucket. I am very proud to represent you at the state level. I am the current chair of the Senate Education Committee, and before that I was in the City Council, and before that I was in the School Committee. So I'm the only candidate in this stage that is actually been in every level of government doing legislation. Not only that, but I'm a mom. I'm also an immigrant, and I am very happy to share with you that I have great experience in the financial sector professionally, and for education, I have received a master's in public administration. Why I'm running is because I really care deeply to make sure that policy works for all Rhode Islanders. And I do believe that we need representation that matters at the table. People that have been able to understand the struggles of Congressional District 1 residents, and I have been able to do that and advocate for legislation at the state level for many issues that are really important. Gun sales control, reproductive health, education, housing, and I look forward for you to get to know my candidacy more. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gabe Amo, and I'm running for Congress because I believe Rhode Islanders deserve a representative who can be effective from day one. I grew up here in Pawtucket. I currently live in Providence, and in my experience, I have lived a life that has been great because of the investments of so many in this community. My dad owns a liquor store. My mom has been a nurse in nursing homes, and they are hardworking people who inspired me to work at the heights of government. I had the opportunity to work for President Obama as a junior staffer in the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs here in Rhode Island as a senior member of former Governor Raimondo's team, and most recently, just 3 months ago, as the Special Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House, where I helped local leaders across the country, mayors, governors, deal with some of the biggest challenges of our day and invest in people and places around the country, and I want to use that experience to be effective for people here in Rhode Island.
Good evening. Thank you to Black Lives Matter to put this together and give us the opportunity to send a message to you. My name is Anna Quesada. I'm a state senator for District 2 in Providence, and I'm very happy to be able to represent my district for the last 8 years. One of the things, since I'm a social worker, I'm somebody who, a regular Rhode Island, who went from the factory floor to the Senate floor, from the welfare office to the state office. Somebody who worked very hard for everything I have in life. Somebody who represents my district with the best of my knowledge, working hard for raising the minimum wage in Rhode Island to $15 an hour, protecting women's rights, making sure undocumented have the right to have a license, doing work for children to be able to have childcare and many other legislation, making sure women who are able to do the rape without having a license, that was something that we work on in the Senate. And many other issues. I went to school late in my life, and I know how important is education. I'm part of the Judiciary Committee and part of the Education Committee, and I'm very happy to be here. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.
Thank you. My name is Sabina Matos. I'm the Lieutenant Governor for the state of Rhode Island. Before that, I was in the Providence City Council for over 10 years. I served as the Providence City Council President. That's the role I had before becoming Lieutenant Governor. I'm a mother of a daughter of 13 years old, a son that just turned 18. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter also of aging parents, including also my grandmother, who's just 99. And I see the challenges that they're going through right now, trying to extend the little few dollars that they get from the Social Security in order to pay for rent, for food, and for medicine. I'm running for office because of them. I'm running for office, I'm running for Congress because for the first time we're losing rights in this country. My daughter is gonna have less rights than I did, and that is not right. We have to make sure that we protect a woman's right to choose and that we fight to get rid of those assault weapons from our street. Thank you.
Hello, I want to thank BLM, PAC, and Rhode Island Black Business Association for bringing us together, and more so for the critical work you do in our communities. My name is Aaron Regenberg, and I started my career organizing with young people in the Providence Public Schools. Founded the Providence Student Union, and when I was there, students took on racist high-stakes testing policies in our state, and they won. They took on racist school transportation policies and won. They pushed for ethnic studies courses in our schools so they'd be reflected in the curriculum, and they got them. And that's what inspired me to get involved in politics, seeing how important it is for our elected officials to listen to voices from the community and then fight like hell for the issues that they bring forward. And that's the work that I did when I was in the General Assembly, helping lead fights to pass paid sick days for over 100,000 families in our state, and increase wages.
10 seconds.
And begin the fight to reform solitary confinement in our prisons. Change is possible, I've seen it, but it takes communities coming together and organizing and being willing to take on entrenched interests, and that's the work I'd be trying to support as a congressperson.
Thank you so much to all of the candidates who are here again. At this time, we have an esteemed group of panelists here from the community that I would like to open up the candidates to their questions. And so what we'll go is from left to right, or my left to the right, and we will start it off with the President and CEO of the Rhode Island Black Business Association, Lisa Ringland.
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me back there?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, candidates, for being here today. You certainly could be elsewhere, but you chose to be here with us today. And I do a lot of speaking, and I don't feel really good sitting down, but I'm going to try. It's a little challenging for me to sit here and speak, but I must say, today it's August. It is National Black History Month. So as the president and CEO of the Rhode Island Black Business Association, I encourage all of you that are here today to invest and support your local Black and brown and all businesses in our state. But Black businesses are at the bottom in our state right now, and I encourage you to go out and support them in a meaningful way. So with that said, as you can imagine, representing the Rhode Island Black Business Association, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you and asking you some questions around your platform and what you're trying to do. So, Black businesses across the nation are one of the fastest growing, yet they're not able to grow and thrive. Many of us probably remember the 1977 Act, the Community Reinvestment Act, that speaks to financial institution really providing products and services for their community, for people within the community. We know that Black and brown businesses have been shut out historically from accessing contracts, accessing loan, able to grow jobs, and really impact the state's economy. Many of you probably heard me talk about this number, 4,768 Black-owned businesses in the state of Rhode Island. And sadly, only 4% of those businesses are able to have any employees. So I'm going to let that sit for a moment. 90% of small businesses hold very little funding as it relates to making payroll. If you are elected to go to Congress, I want you to speak actionable. What would you do as a congressperson representing Rhode Island to ensure that Black and brown businesses who are currently at the bottom moved in a place where, one, they're able to create jobs, they're able to access loans, right? What would you do about this 1977 Community Reinvestment Act that does not work for the community that it was intended to do?
We'll go to the right this time with Aaron.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for laying out. I mean, we know that Black businesses have been systematically shut out of access to credit, access to capital, and we know there's a real long history of racist banks working to shut communities of color out, and that was one part of what the CRA was intended to resolve. I think that the legal framework around the CRA does not have enough community accountability, right? Banks get to say we're going to take a portion of our investments and put them in the community, but there's no real structure to say, well, how does that go, and who are you investing in, and is it actually working for the people who it should be? So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to expand that accountability system. I think, at the federal level, we need to be prioritizing in every federal program, in every federal contract, making sure that we're getting those to minority-owned businesses. And again, part of that is implementation, because there are goals and then they're often not met. I also think, talking about the payroll and having those resources, an issue that I hear the most often when I'm talking to business owners, it feels like, is health insurance.
30 seconds.
The bureaucracy, the hassle, the cost of rising health insurance. It seems crazy to me that we have a system where we're putting all of the responsibility for health coverage onto business owners, and particularly it's going to disproportionately impact Black business owners who don't have that funding set aside. And that's why I think we should do what every other country does and have Medicare for all. That's something that we often think about as helping patients. That's going to help businesses, and it's going to help, in particular, businesses that struggle with some of these issues.
Thank you, Lisa, for that question. The Community Reimbursement Act is not implemented the way it should be. We should be able to hold the financial institution accountable for having equity in the way how they implement the Community Reimbursement Act. In Congress, I would fight and advocate for a better implementation process in which we can make sure that communities that have been in disadvantage are able to get a fair share when it comes to the funding that the banks put back into, a financial institution put back into the communities. That's one thing. The other thing that we have to do is make sure that we are helping our small business community, our Black and brown small business owners, as well as the women-owned business, to make it easier for them to have access to the capital and have access to the funding available through contracts through the state, contracts, federal contracts. Right now, and you and I have had this conversation before, and I had the conversation with many members of the community, I believe that the way how we go about certifying the small businesses and for NBE and WBE needs to be updated. And I know this is a conversation we had had for a long time since I was in the Providence City Council. We have been having this conversation
30
over
seconds.
and over again. We have to make sure that we are not creating a law that is punishing those that are trying to do the right thing. We're creating a law thinking about who's going to break the law instead of trying to help the ones that want to do the right thing.
I used to have a business many years ago here in Providence. I used to have a grocery market on Prairie Avenue and a construction company in the early 20s in Rhode Island that I used to fix houses. And I know the struggle the small business go through, and especially communities of color. But I think it's two things that we need to do for them. We need to help them to educate them, how to do a business plans, how to be ready when a loan comes, they will be able to apply. Because sometimes the money comes, but they're not ready to apply for those business. Those businesses are not ready to apply because they don't have all the paperwork they're required to be able to apply. My daughter has a food truck right now, and I see all the struggle that she goes town by town. They have different license that you have to apply. How do you do it? And many other things. As a congresswoman, I made sure that we bring enough resources to Rhode Island to help our small business, to educate them, to help them to grow, because that's one of the biggest issues that I really feel the most of small business have. I feel very sad when any big company comes to Rhode Island and the city council and everybody give them a tax break, but they don't give it to small business. They don't help them. They don't see, they're going to be a big hotel, they bring in work. Who's going to clean the beds if they don't have workers? They have to have workers.
30 seconds.
And I don't believe that only tax break go for big business and never nothing for small people up in that business who on the corner working 7 days a week for the business. And that's something that I will fight to make sure resources come to Rhode Island to help a small business. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a great question. My dad's a black business owner. I hope he's a dues-paying member of REBA. If not, we'll talk to him after. But the CRA is an important tool. It's an important tool that we need to add more strength to and expand the types of institutions that the Community Reinvestment Act applies to. It can be mortgage institutions, credit unions, even broader. Let's give it more teeth. That's going to require legislation. So you asked what I would do as a congressperson. I would go to the CRA and see the whole range of institutions that we can ensure that it applies to make sure that communities are getting their fair share. I think that's a prudent step. But to go beyond that, I would team up our capacity with the CRA with greater investments in the Minority Business Development Agency. For those of you who may not know, this is a subunit of the United States Department of Commerce that is tasked with helping spur growth in minority-owned businesses. And so it only got permanently authorized under the President's bipartisan infrastructure law that I helped advocate for and got lots of major support, including from leaders in the Congressional Black Caucus. So it's incredibly critical that we make sure that MBDA has real teeth, has real resources to team up with the other parts of government who are active, including the SBA, to make sure that we are giving every opportunity to our black businesses and all of our businesses that are minority-led to thrive.
So Lisa, thank you for the question. I think that practically I have implemented programs already in my professional level, such as the ones that, as a congressperson, will take that experience and then bring in form of legislation. I'm going to explain myself. I worked for a credit union for 13 years doing exactly that, creating policies that will close the gap between the underserved communities and the small business owners with access to capital, and making sure that we were creating partnerships with local organizations just like REBA to make sure that we get those loans out to the streets where the small business owners really do need to empower our communities. So I would do two things. First of all, the Community Reinvestment Act really lacked the expertise for people that really have done the work at the ground to make sure that they know that these eligibility standards that they put, there needs to be more flexible. For example, sometimes we put like credit scores that are 620, 680 for business owners to get access to capital. That's not always the case. We have to be very mindful that sometimes, especially after the pandemic, the credit can be affected for some things. So what we did at the credit union level was change those flexible rules and making sure that we do things like making sure that the RIVA Association create a reference letter so they have the opportunity to have that access to capital programs. So not only get accountability, but also get technical assistance, making sure that we have those policies in place to create grants and collateral for small businesses to get access to those programs. So I will take that experience into Congress and create policy that works for the small business community.
Thank you, Lisa, for that question, and thank you for your leadership, especially here in Rhode Island. I just want to start off by saying that the CRA is an important start, but it's what we hear all the time. There's a lot of lip service, but there's no real implementation in terms of the compliance. So at the local level, I'll just give you a couple of examples of what I have done and what I intend to do should I be elected to Congress. So if we look at our NBE requirements on the local level, we've seen it far and far too often where there is no real compliance standards and there is no real accountability. So there are developers who are getting off the hook on not ensuring that they're including 10% women and minority-owned business-owned contractors into their projects. And that's an abdication of responsibility. When we think about what we need to do at the federal level, particularly given how so many people in our communities are struggling. I grew up in the Fox Point neighborhood in the city, and what hurts me every single day is the gentrification that I've seen in that community, where we had very vibrant communities of Portuguese, Irish, Cape Verdean immigrants who started their life and their families there, but have been since pushed out because of these terrible policies that have been in place, whether it's the ongoing gentrification, the redlining that we've experienced in our neighborhoods, and we need to correct those, but most importantly, we need to ensure that there's compliance, particularly at the federal level, and that's exactly what I would try to do should I be elected your next congressperson.
Thanks for starting this off in just the right place, Lisa. The CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, is a really important tool and a really important piece of federal legislation. When I first started my career, right out of law school, I went to work in Congress. So I'm actually the only person up here who's had any experience in the House of Representatives, the job we're interviewing for. I was a senior staffer at 2 different times in my career for 2 different members of Congress. The first one was Joseph Kennedy, and he was on the House Banking Committee. So the CRA was my bread and butter for 4 years of my life, and I studied that, and we passed some pretty remarkable legislation to beef it up. The 1977 Act, passed by Senator William Proxmire, was a nice gesture. It kind of encouraged banks to lend into areas that had been historically disinvested by other banks. And that was a good idea, but in 1989, we actually passed legislation that was signed by President George Bush that beefed up the Community Reinvestment Act and made the exam on the CRA part of the bank's examination overall. What does that mean? A bank examination is when they go in and test the safety and soundness of a financial institution. And if you don't pass that examination, they shut your doors, close you down. So we actually made the Community Reinvestment Act a part of the bank examination process so that banks had to deliver. They had to show a real track record of success in investing in minority communities and very often in communities that had been disinvested over the course of many years. Now, like most pieces of legislation, you start out with a good idea, you beef it up some more, it becomes meaningful over the course of years. And it wasn't until about 1995 that new amendments to the CRA were passed, largely with the help of Gene Ludwig, the Comptroller of the Currency, to make it a much more forceful piece of legislation. What we need to do right now is to be, what your congressperson can do is be proactive in taking advantage of that law and lots of other federal incentive programs to drive lending into minority-owned businesses and into disadvantaged or disinvested communities. It's a really important idea. Businesses live on credit. They thrive on credit. They need credit to survive.
5 seconds.
And it's that credit that we need to drive into those communities.
Thank you so much. So we have one more candidate joining the stage with us today. What we'll do is we will add a quick 50 seconds intro, and then we will go on to our next panelist question. Welcome.
You need that.
So first and foremost, my utmost apologies. Been stuck on 195 for about 2 hours, but everyone is safe, so that's a great thing, but I do want to apologize for the tardiness. My name is Stephanie Beauty. I'm running for Congress. A little bit about myself. I grew up here on the West End in Providence. I went to Gilbert Stewart Middle School. From there, I went to Hope High School. Then after that, I went to URI as part of the Talent Development Program. Talent Development helped to cover the financial aid portion of my studies in order for me to be able to go to school. I'm the first person in my family to actually go to college, so I'm really proud of that. From then on, when I graduated, the economy went really bad, and that's kind of when the bank failures took place, and I found myself struggling to find a job. And at the time I wanted to go into law school, I was interning at the Public Defender's Office. And so I pursued a career as a social worker for folks with developmental disabilities. I did that for a number of years, actually fighting with the state to make sure that they were funded. And then after that, I decided to go back to school, get my master's in information systems. And since then, I've been working in cybersecurity, mobile app development, API integrations, IoT, so you name it. My name is Stephanie Beauty, and I hope that to have a informative discussion about my platform today. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Next up, I want to introduce our next panelist. Go ahead, Paige.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I said good morning, my goodness. Good evening. I'm Paige Closhas Parks, Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count. I've had the pleasure of working with many of you over the past several years. I want to thank in advance for all the work you have done in each of your roles, fighting for the needs of Rhode Island's children and families. And I also want to encourage you that despite the outcomes of this election, I hope each of you will use the platforms that you have built to continue to fight for the needs of our kids, especially for our Black and brown kids, our low-income kids, our multilingual families, our kids with disabilities, and our immigrant children. They need you. You all are leaders, and we hope that you'll continue to lead for our kids, and we're happy to partner with you on that. So you'll not be surprised that my question this evening is about childcare. So to families, childcare and early learning programs are a nonpartisan issue. But in Congress, they can be a political issue, particularly when it comes to funding. Currently, the number of Rhode Island families participating in the Child Care Assistance Program is at a 20-year low. We continue to have waiting lists for early intervention services, and about 20% of Head Start and early Head Start classrooms are closed because programs can't find and keep the highly trained educators they need because wages are too low. These challenges are not unique to our state, and most of the resources and policies to support these programs come from the federal government. How would you approach colleagues in the House during this divisive time to secure sufficient federal funding so that children and families in Rhode Island have access to the child care and early learning programs they need to succeed?
We'll start it off with Stephanie on the left.
I love that question. One, because I have a 5-year-old. And to be quite honest, I couldn't afford daycare. I know that sounds ridiculous as someone in tech, but it's really that expensive. The cost of daycare is about $1,700 a month, depending on how much you pay for rent. And if you don't qualify for low income, that's what it is. And if you are in low income, then you have, what Paige mentioned, a long waiting list to do that. The positive part of COVID, to be quite honest, was that I got to stay at home with my child. And I think that the conversation here is to really move past debating with the Republican Party right now. It's really talking about enforcing it. How do we want people to be secure and go to work when they don't have adequate and sufficient child care? How do we make sure that this is something that is on their forefront and not just something in the back of their minds. And so I think that really being strong and passionate about how do we make sure that, one, we're supporting not just low income, but also middle class families, because it is really, really expensive to have a child, and to be able to maintain that. And how do we ensure that we have the best capable staff? Because we want to make sure that staff are properly trained with CPR, but also that they have funding in order to make sure that the facilities are safe, clean, and well-to-do. And so that is a big part of, one, is being a mom, but even more so knowing that that is a struggle for, my sister is trying to find a nanny for her now 24-year-old son. So this is something that is really important to me because it is a human issue that we need to address, and even more so tackle it in a more aggressive format, because it affects us not just in Rhode Island, but also for folks in Kansas too.
Hi, Paige, thanks for the question. I love talking about this topic because this is probably the highest and best use of government funds in the whole world. It's remarkable that over and over and over again, studies have come out that show that there is no government spending that produces a higher return, that is a higher payback, than investment in early childhood education. And that's such an important idea to ground us with. There are some government programs that probably don't pay back a whole lot. This one really does. And what it does is it gives kids an early start in life to be learners, and to prepare them for the challenges of school when they're a little bit older, and also to just give them basic skills and some structure in their lives for some kids who don't have enough structure in their lives. So it's a really important idea, and it's absolutely the best use of government funds that there are. I'm sorry to hear about so many of the Head Start programs closing down, because this is a really key issue that really needs to be worked on, and I think we need to deliver resources there. My oldest child is actually a primary school teacher, and she works with kids from the 3 to 6 year old age, so helping them get ready for getting into public schools when they're a little bit older. And she talks a lot about the social and emotional learning that those kids go through in that really critical time period. So she's responsible for what they call the whole child in her Montessori school, which is all about dance and movement and nature and outdoor experience and nutrition and organic farming and all the kind of stuff that isn't reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's her job. And it's remarkable to me to watch those kids go through that program and come out of it and get into school and have such a leg up and have such a benefit. My kids were lucky enough to have that, and it served them really well. I think every American kid should have that.
Thank you for this very, very important question. And I can assure you today, and say this to the rest of the crowd, that this will be a top priority should I be elected your congressperson. So I want to start off about why this work isn't theoretical for me. So first off, I was a beneficiary of Head Start. So it's personal to me. Anybody on this stage go to Providence Public Schools as a kid? Providence Public Schools.
Yeah, Summit Avenue School.
Okay, so I went. Yes. Well, I went to Providence Public Schools from K through 8, and I had that experience. The other experience that I have is I've been a teacher for nearly the last decade. So this work isn't theoretical for me. I'm a 4th grade teacher. So all the things that my colleagues are talking about in terms of social emotional learning and the important things that our kids need in classrooms, that's what I've done for nearly the last decade as an educator. And I just want to say, as a legislator, what I'm responsible for as the chair of public property is helping disperse over $700 million in public school bonds, because I'm deeply passionate about this issue. But when it comes to childcare, one of the things that I'm going to fight for at the federal level is universal pre-K and childcare for all of our families. Yes, we can clap for that, because that's what our families absolutely need. And we also need to fight for free childcare for all. That's an important piece of legislation at the federal level. We need to make sure that we are raising the Wage Act so that families have access and capacity to actually send their kids to childcare. This is an equity issue, and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that we fix and correct the racial and economic inequality that we're experiencing, and that certainly starts with childcare. So I really appreciate that question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paige, for your work and Rhode Island Kids Count. I would like to start by saying that this has already been a priority for me. I've been the champion and the lead legislator for the Child Care is Essential Act at the State Senate, but also the Early Educator Act, which also increased wages for early educators, because it's not fair that many of them are working moms that are not able to do neither minimum wage, like they're like lower like wages, and it's just really unfair that they're taking care of our more precious people in the world, which are our kids. As a mom, I understand firsthand the need of childcare. And how do I do that in Congress? Just like I have done at the state level. For many years, we have done deep investment at the state level for our child care system. And what I have done here is just making sure that our legislators at the state senate believe, and in the General Assembly believe, that this is an economic issue. If we do investments in child care and early education, that is going to translate to our economy, because our working families are going to be able to go and be part of our, working force. And that is very important. So I will translate that experience that I done that at the federal level. But the most important thing is that I have good news. I have also, as a chair of the Education Committee, have implemented a holistic approach with the work of the Right from the Sky campaign. There is a group here in Rhode Island that is organizing, and what we have done is do a holistic way with the child care system, pre-K system, early education system is together, so we have a holistic way, and by 2028 in Rhode Island, we will have universal pre-K school and making sure that no more classrooms will be closed here in Rhode Island, but we need investments from the federal level, and I will pledge to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige, for that question, and thank you for all the work that you've led. I want to go deeper into the specifics of your question. In approaching Republicans and thinking about a bipartisan argument here, I think we've heard the theme of making it an economic argument. We saw how effective the expanded child tax credit was. Going to the results of that, we saw a lot of that in the research come back that people were using that expanded child tax credit for childcare. And so making a compelling case that this is a really important need for our economy is central in getting some Republican support. You even had people like Mitt Romney be supportive of a child tax credit. So you've got some targets there. Going further, I think this is some of the biggest unfinished business of the Biden-Harris first term, right? We're 2+ years in. There were elements of taking care of our care economy, caregivers at every level, from child care to elder care. This is something that we have to look at very critically in 3 ways. One, I think we should look and explore a cap on the amount of a household's income that is going to child care. It can't be 30%, it can't be 40%, and you see that for so many families. We also need to make sure that we're funding both providers, many of whom are black and brown, and making sure that they are funded from the federal level, in addition to trying to recruit additional talent to offer this critical service. And ultimately, I think what we need to do is make sure that we are valuing both the work and the goals. And so if we go forward here, I do think universal pre-K is achievable, and we have to set it as a North Star to make sure that child care through the whole system is something that we're thinking through.
Nice to see you, Paige. I've been missing seeing you at the Senate. But it's a few things that we need to do. Childcare is such an important issue for so many working mothers like I am. And I remember I had 3 children, and for me at the beginning it was very hard, but I used to work in factories, and I didn't have no problem being able to qualify to childcare assistant. But one of the issues that we have, when we passed the minimum wage, that was my bill, one of the things that I called the DHS office and I said, how does this affect working families? And one of the things that I was very surprised is there's somebody who's making $14 an hour do not qualify for child care anymore. And that is unbelievable. How somebody making $14 an hour would not qualify. And one of the things that we need to do in Washington is to raise the poverty level in the United States is too low, and many families do not qualify for child care. And that needs to be fixed. We need to raise the poverty level in this country. It's unbelievable that somebody making $14 an hour do not qualify for child care. We need universal child care. We need to pay more money to the people who work the most with our children, who take care of them, and to send back people to work. Many moms not being able to be back to work because do not qualify for child care. And as a congresswoman, I can agree with you, I would fight for that to be changed, because that's not been changed since 1964 when that act was done in the United States, and it needs to be fixed, and it had to be fixed in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the great things about being in Rhode Island is that we have candidates that agree in what is important for our working families. We are fortunate because there are other states that don't have what we have here. So as you can hear, most of us, or all of us, agree that there should be more resources from the federal government for child care. But we also have to make sure that we provide more resources for families to be able to have options about where they want their kids to go. If they want to stay with a family home daycare, there should be more resources to help them have their children to go into a family home daycare. I can tell you, as someone that experienced both, I had my kids experience both the home daycare with a family as well as a center. And we should be able to provide those resources from the federal level to be available for the families to be able to have their kids go into child care and early education. One of the hardest things that I have gone through is when I have a family that calls me because they applied for the pre-K lottery and their child was not picked. And they're struggling trying to figure out what they're gonna do. Does one of the parents will have to leave their job? Unfortunately, most of the time it's the mother, right? What does that do for the woman and her career and for her future, and when she is going to retire, for her income? So this is an issue that is, I believe all of us agree, we have to make sure that the federal government provide more resources for child care.
Thank you, Paige, for your incredibly important work. You know, our system is upside down. I've got a 2-year-old, and every time I drop him off at daycare, hand him over to these 2 teachers, and there's like 11 toddlers running around like crazy, and these 2 folks have to care for them and teach them all day, every day, and provide love and education. And they should be millionaires. Like, that is some of the most important and challenging work that there is in our society. And yet we have a system that pays them poverty wages, right? It is completely upside down. We need to be raising wages and benefits. I remember when we were writing our paid sick days legislation, the home child care providers came to me and said, we've been having trouble negotiating sick days with the state. We need your help. Can you put us in this legislation? And we wrote it to cover them. And there was a lot of pressure from a bunch of different forces to strip them out as the legislation was making its way through the process. My response every time was, no freaking way. These are the people who are caring for our kids. It's the most important work. Of course they need to have benefits like paid sick days. You know, Gabe mentioned that this was a big part of Biden's initial Build Back Better agenda, the care economy, long-term care and child care, both investing and making sure that people have access and that the workers who are doing this incredibly important work get the compensation they deserve. And I know you mentioned Republicans, but I don't want to sound too pessimistic. There's work to do on the Democratic side, because it was Democrats that stripped that out of Biden's Build Back Better agenda, right? It was Senator Manchin and Sinema and conservatives, Dems on the House side. You know, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is the caucus David Cicilline helped lead, that I'm proud to have endorsed me, they are making this a priority for this year, organizing, building a foundation so that the moment we win back control in 2024, we're coming in guns blazing saying, we're going to invest in childcare, and I'd be really, really proud to be able to support that work.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to our next panelist. Zay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Zainabu Cham, a youth advocate from Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and senior at the Met High School at the Justice Building. I am also CEO and founder of Sunubadi, an online West African boutique that ethically sources African products imported from Senegal, West Africa. Today, I'm here speaking on not just the youth of Rhode Island, but for all of the marginalized BIPOC students whose voices are consistently silenced and ignored. The significance of education in preventing criminal behavior cannot be overlooked. I know personally. As a Black first-generation youth, I have friends from all walks of life, and I've seen the effects that it can do to them. My question for you all is, how do you plan to back initiatives aimed at enhancing and supporting educational opportunities in BIPOC communities and curbing the school-to-prison pipeline?
We'll go Stephanie.
I think this is an excellent question. So one of the things about Hope High, the nickname actually is called Hope for the Hopeless, right? So a lot of folks who say don't survive, you either have teenage pregnancy, you're arrested. If you're part of the small group that happens to make it out of Hope High School, you go to college. Some might flunk out because they didn't have the best resources and support. And if by some chance of a miracle, you pass that level, you know, you're kind of like the shiny star, the golden ticket for Hope High School. So I have a lot of friends and a lot of acquaintances that I've seen, unfortunately, due to environment, life circumstances, things that were beyond their control. And to be quite honest, the way that the education system has been designed in Rhode Island, and it hasn't changed from the House or the Senate level yet, it has encouraged poverty. It has encouraged to keep our students behind. I'm tired of hearing about these programs, people showing up, taking photo opportunities with our Black and brown students, and they continue to fail in the same system that was designed to keep them failing. And that's not going to change by sending the same type of people that promote this. Because if we're being honest, poverty is profitable for these type of people. Sit in our faces and tell us about these solutions that they're going to propose, and you look at your communities, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, they deteriorate time after time after time, and nothing changes. And so one of the things about my platform, and you can look at it online, my platform has been there before any other candidate, has talked about education, really funneling the pipeline to give you an option besides college, because there should be another opportunity for success for you. Good job. It is a personal point, and it is a success metric, because that is the only way to eradicate poverty in these communities, is to make sure that you are not set up for failure so you don't have the lowest paying jobs.
Good job, Steph.
Some of these answers are pretty easy and straightforward, hard to implement. For example, one of them would be reinstating affirmative action at every level of our public school system and throughout colleges. So that's one thing that I think we can all agree on, is that we need to find ways to overrule this regressive Supreme Court and reinstate affirmative action for folks to have equal opportunity. I think that's a really important priority for our society. There's a lot of things we can do in education. It's an area, I think, as I said at the top of the hour, that we will never regret the money that we invest in education as a society. A lot of people have said over the years from the founding of this country that it is the cornerstone of democracy. In order to have good citizens, you have to be people who are educated and understand civics and understand literature and understand math and science, not just for earning good money, but also for being good members of our society and good citizens. So we will always be grateful for the money that we invest in education. Right now, we're suffering from about 50 years of dramatic underinvestment in education in public schools, particularly in urban centers and particularly among communities of color. And that is a devastating indictment of our country. We need to remedy that we're seeing generations of young people grow up without the opportunities that they deserve. And what really is tragic about that is that it's squandering human potential. Because if every individual young person can grow up to achieve their full potential, then our society achieves its full potential. And there's so much talent and so much energy and so much drive that's being squandered by the lack of strong investment in public education. It should be the cornerstone of our society, and it's something that we need to attend to for the benefit of all of us.
Thank you for this question. I really appreciate it. So I think what's at the root of this, and if we're going to be completely honest and completely frank, is that Black and brown communities always get the short end of the stick. It is the reality. And if you look at our public schools, there has been historic disinvestment in our schools, almost criminally underfunded. And so we need leadership at the federal level that's going to stand up and make sure that we're bringing as many federal resources back to our state and back to our education system, particularly in our urban cores where there's so much disparity. Now, I'll say from my own personal experience, when I was 12 years old, I was lucky enough to go to the Daniel Green Middle School. And it was actually then Congressman Cicilline who helped me get into that school, and that changed my trajectory forever. I was able to get into the Wheeler School and then go to Brown for undergrad and grad school. But that should not be an exception. That should be the norm for all of our kids, all of our Black and brown children, and that's exactly why I'm in this fight. We don't need more saviors that are going to give us lip service, say one thing and then do another, and not put our communities first, and that's exactly why I'm in this fight. But I also want to address an important question that you asked that no one's addressed yet, and that is removing SROs from our schools. We need to end the school to prison pipeline because, look, let's be frank, if you go to some of our most wealthy and most affluent communities, and if you go to their schools, do they have droves of officers walking around? No. And that's what we need to fix.
Hi, thank you for your question, and thank you for making Pawtucket proud. Certainly, I'm really excited to see you here today. I think that a lot of the things that you say comes to one word that we utilize or sometimes overutilize when it's convenient, which is equity. I would say that we, instead of empowering our youth, we underestimate our youth, especially our BIPOC youth. And I would say that I have a lot of hope because I see that the youth are speaking up and are doing what is supposed to help legislators like me understand what are the solutions. So I would say that I'm really, really, really hopeful because as a legislator, I saw the youth organize to make sure that I was the sponsor of a legislator called Building Opportunities for Out of School Time. What does that mean? Making sure that the students have investments in after-school programs that really are meaningful and matters. As a person that really saw firsthand, member of the Juvenile Hearing Board, I saw that youth were getting in trouble just because they didn't have an opportunity of having an after-school program or a mentor or someone that was there guiding them. And then so for me, it's important to invest in education and programs that really, really do matter and do the work. We do have a coalition in Rhode Island that is amazing and is doing every day hands-on opportunities for BIPOC youth, and then we need to make sure that we continue doing that, as well as creating opportunities for scholarships such as HOPE and Promise Scholarship, and also making sure that we continue doing things like in-state tuition, and I'm proud that I have done that here at the state level, and I continue that same passion at the federal level.
Thank you for that question. The federal government right now doesn't have a very active, proactive agenda on education. And, it's generally confined to let's increase funding for Title I schools. Let's, look at broad programs at the higher education side. But your question so accurately focuses on the pathway to get to an opportunity after high school, after your initial part of education. And for me, I think a big focus has to be on economic opportunity. We have this historic moment right now where there are trillions of dollars coming out of Washington, D.C. to build our country back in so many ways, whether it's on infrastructure, building out electric vehicle charging, building out our climate readiness with so many clean energy investments, getting our talented people, talented young people from our schools into a lot of these opportunities that don't require a college education has to be central, right? Because a lot of the challenges that people face are economic. And why you may make certain life choices or is the burden that you have coming out of your household. And so I really want to focus as a congressperson here for Rhode Island is making sure that the equity that we describe comes to the job opportunities of the future that will last into the decades to come. These are family-sustaining opportunities, and we have to be in the game. So you need a congressperson who's going to be a vigorous advocate for getting every single dollar, every single program, every single opportunity here. But when we look at the schoolhouse, investing in recruitment and retention of school leaders who care, of school leaders who can help transform lives, is also of utmost importance. And the last thing I would say is on the violence and community violence intervention, making sure those funds help the right programs throughout our community.
Well, education. Education always been for me a very important issue. Since I became a senator and I met with the Senate President, she asked me what committee you wanted to be, and I said education, because education is the one who opened the door to us. And for me, education is personal. I went to college very late in my life because I didn't have that opportunity at my young age. But one thing that we need to do in Rhode Island, and not just in Rhode Island, because we have an education issue all over the nation. We need to make education a constitutional right for students. Because Rhode Island, copied from Massachusetts, many other acts that Massachusetts has, but we do not want to make Rhode Island education a constitutional right for our students, because that's the way to invest in our children. That's the way to invest in education. And we pay now for education or we pay later for education. How? Because if we're not providing the right education, a lot of our children ending in jail. And what we pay now? A lot of money for those kids. It's unbelievable that somebody at training school make more money than somebody in a regular school. And those are the things that we need to change. How we change it? We need to bring more resources. We have to make sure that our school have the money and the resource that they need, and that we are providing. And that's the way to bring it from Washington. But not just in Rhode Island, need to be a constitutional right. In every state, education should be a constitutional right for children to have the best education possible. As your congressman, I guarantee you that I will fight hard for every state to have the money and the resources they need to make education better for every student, not depending what zip code you live on.
Thank you. I agree that we need more resources for education, but I want to give you a different perspective. Earlier, Councilman Goncalves asked who went to the Providence Public School here. And this is Senator Quesada and I went to Dominican Republic, so we didn't go to the public schools here. But I can tell you something that is different of what I learned from my friends that did go to school here in the United States. My friends, many of them that are successful right now, college degree, have a master's degree, were told that they were not college material. And that's the reality that many Black and brown students go through. If you have an accent, because in your family they speak Spanish or any other language or Portuguese, you get put into a ESL program even though you don't need an ESL program. And the perception is that you're not going to be able to be successful and go to college. And that needs to change. That is something that we have to make sure that we're providing more resources to educate the guidance counselors and those that are in leadership in the school and speaking to our youth. I have seen it. Some of my brightest friends were told you're not college material. Make sure that you get a technical class while you're here. Get your license for so you can work in a hair salons. And believe me, I believe in having a path for other options that is not just college. But the way how the expectation that is put in our student is having an effect on what is going to happen after, whether they're going to go to college, yes or no, whether they're going to be successful. And we need to put more resources to give opportunities for internships, like Prepare RI. I have some of the students from Prepare RI on my office, so we need to continue to provide opportunities like that from federal funding that should come for them.
Thank you for your question, and thank you for your leadership. One of the things that frustrates me the most is, I hope this hasn't been your experience, but seeing how often our schools do not value student voice. You know, working with the Providence Student Union, I saw the incredible impact that young people can actually have when they come together, right? Taking on drill, kill, bubble, fill, standardized test policies to say we actually need critical thinking in our schools. You know, taking on obstacles to attendance. We need bus passes for thousands of students that didn't have to walk 3 miles through the snow and rain to get to class. You know, launching the Counselors Not Cops campaign to say that we need to be supporting our young people, not policing them, not starting them into the school to prison pipeline. We don't value the leadership that comes from the people who are in our schools, whether it's students, whether it's families. Providence right now, as most people know, is under a state takeover. And I remember when the state was beginning its takeover, starting to launch it, there was a bunch of community forums. And so many young people from our youth orgs, just from schools, families came out, educators came out, and they were saying, we have all these ideas. We know what works. We know what doesn't work because we're living it every day. Let us into this process. Give us real leadership roles. And there was such a wasted opportunity there because, again, the approach was this top-down system that does not work. So I think we need to be working to empower our young people, empower our families, empower our educators. One other thing, at the federal level, I think it's really important that we remember that education is not just impacted by what happens within the walls of a classroom, right? You know, young people, housing policy is education justice, because it's really hard to learn and do your homework when you're housing insecure, when your family's dealing with you know, potential homelessness. Food policy, the Farm Bill is education justice, because it's really hard to learn when you're hungry, you're not getting the nutrition you need, and that is all decided by federal policy. So we need to be thinking about what happens in our schools and the larger picture of how students are kept back in so many ways.
Thank you to all the candidates for being here tonight and for your very swift and articulate responses. Despite the unwavering and commendable efforts of our local education agencies and educators, Rhode Island students have experienced unprecedented learning loss, as reflected in the most RICAS data. Less than 1/3 of Rhode Island students are proficient in core subjects. Regarding English language arts, only 33.1% are proficient. Regarding math, 26.6% are proficient. And regarding science, only 30.7% are proficient. And when race is factored, Black and brown youth are disproportionately performing lower than their white counterparts. How will you address the current federal education funding formula and prioritize education investments to improve student achievement outcomes for local Rhode Island youth? Specifically, please outline your education priorities and provide a clear strategy for ensuring equitable and effective utilization of the Congressional office to inform the usage of federal dollars to drive positive changes in the state's education system.
Stephanie?
That's a great question. One of the things about that statistic is if you break it down by zip code, you can kind of see the proficiency change across. So I see you're nodding, so I want to say that we're in agreement there. So the way that we do that, part of my platform, is that we use federally funded dollars to level the playing field. So Kiwan, who lives on the south side, doesn't have to compete with Keith, who lives in Jamestown. And they're both going to learn the same quote-unquote type of education, but one, we're being quite honest that that's not truly the case. So we're really using federally funded dollars to make sure that the education curriculum in Jamestown mirrors that in Central Falls, mirrors the same thing from Socket, and all the way back down here in Providence. I think that that sets the playing field. How do I plan to outline that? I think that looking at it from a zip code perspective, and then looking at it from a education perspective, what type of teachers are part of the curriculum in Jamestown, their certifications, and making sure that we have the same thing. Because if you look at Hope High School, right across the street is Moses Brown, and you see the clear disparities, and it's across the street, right? So that's very evident of what the problem is and how broken that is. Another piece is really creating a pipeline that when you're part of your school, that there is a resource so you're tapped into. One of the great things about New York that they do in their school system is if you're interested in a particular trade, I want you to make sure that you have that certification. So now if you are trying to apply for a job and your manager is racist, you have that certification already, so you're not going through those hoops and those steps. So we're creating a funnel of opportunity there. So part of the educational curriculum isn't being based on standardized test scores, but really job preparedness and readiness so that way you can be successful. How do we look at science, hands-on learning? How do we build with math, hands-on learning, Legos, architecture, design? There's so many different ways that we can kind of move the margin instead of just having people circle A, B, or C, or pick one, right? So I think there's a unique set of skill set that we can kind of bring in with federally funded dollars to help support our teachers so that way they have the resources that they need, and we level the playing field across the board.
It's great that you point out the acuteness of the problem, and it's made worse by COVID, by kids losing 2 years of learning in classrooms. And so this is a really serious problem that we need to address. I agree with Stephanie that we need to use federal money to level the playing field, and that should be the first and highest priority of federal money. Because what happens is a lot of times cities, and this is the sort of the tragic reality of our current system, in cities where people can opt out of the public education system and opt into really good private schools, people have an incentive to not fund the public schools. That's just a reality. It's a little bit like the subway in New York City. If people can ride around in limousines, they won't fund the subway. And it's the same thing in Rhode Island right now, especially in Providence, where you have some really high quality private schools that some people are fortunate enough to afford. And as a result, they systematically defund the public schools. And we need to reverse that. That's a good use of federal money, is to even that out and to level the playing field in that way. There's also a lot we can do to elevate teaching, and I like some of the ideas that I heard earlier about lifting up teaching as a profession, not just in compensation though, but in all the different parts of being a professional. So accountability and status and honor and the way in which we treat professionals. So I'm a college professor. Right now I teach at Yale Law School, and I get a lot of status from that. You know, it's a nice, rewarding job, and I get a pretty decent paycheck for it as well. Why don't elementary school teachers get that? Their job is no less important than mine. In fact, they're preparing the kids that I'm going to see in a few years down the road. So that needs to happen, is lift up teaching as a profession. And we can't ignore social and emotional learning.
30 seconds.
Because that's what keeps so many children back, is not having the social skills and the emotional skills that they need to cope in school. And finally, trying to help students understand the concept of being lifelong learners, and really looking at a broader set of evaluative tools that measure teachers' success by whether they have created inspired students who become lifelong learners. Lots more to say on that subject.
Absolutely, and it's so hard to articulate all the important things that we need to do around education. And I think I'm just so grateful that you continue to ask questions about education. I just want to remind everybody that I am the only early childhood education person on this stage. So I've been a fourth grade teacher for nearly the last decade. So I can put my money where my mouth is, and I can also say, you know, bureaucrats unfortunately don't understand education. And I think that's why the systemic inequities and the things that are reinforced in our education system are constantly reinforced. But I would say, you know, your zip code should not determine your destiny. That's just the bottom line. And as your next congressperson, I will work incredibly hard to make sure that we can move forward on things like the Higher Education Opportunity Act. We can also ensure that we're fighting for a minimum $60,000 salary for teachers all across this country, because that's exactly what they deserve. And I think when it comes down to the nuances of what we do in classrooms, we need to be focused on social emotional learning. We need to be focused on how we invest in our kids so they can become critical thinkers. And we need to address the stark economic inequality that we're experiencing. And that starts from addressing affordable housing in our communities. It starts by investing in our families, particularly our families that are disproportionately impacted, our Black and brown communities. And that's exactly what I will do if you elect me as your next congressperson. And it's what I've done at the local level. I've brought millions of dollars of funding to the local schools in my district, and that's going to be a major, major priority for me at the federal level.
Thank you, Elijah. Education is my #1 policy priority, and it's always been since I was elected into the school committee. Why? Because I believe education is an equalizer. It really worked for me and many families in Rhode Island. So I would say that the first thing that I would do if elected to Congress is transfer all the leadership skills that I have built here with the legislation that I have introduced and passed as a chair of the Senate Education Committee to the Congress level. For example, I would say that right now, since 2019, we've been able to take a look at the funding formula in the state Senate. And this funding formula doesn't currently work for our community of colors and for cities such as Providence, Central Falls, Pawtucket, Woonsocket, which are the lowest performing districts in our state. That is not a coincidence. It is because we do need to do better about making sure, and it's no secret, that it takes more money to educate multilingual learners, special needs education students, and make sure that we have support of our families that they need. So we need to make sure that we look at the parameters of how the funding formula was built, and at the federal level really do investments that bring to Rhode Island what we need. For example, there's another thing that is a factor. Our students, our brown and minority communities, often need the meals at school to be able to perform. So I have a bill for Meal for All, Healthy Meals for All at the schools, that I think that we do need to have that implemented in the funding formula at the federal level to make sure that they are successful, but also mental health in the schools. All of that should be included in the education funding formula, and I have worked at the state level already in those initiatives, and I think that experience I could transfer to the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this question. Like some of the folks who've said before, I don't have lots of disagreement. I think focusing on social determinants is such an important thing. I think on the mental health side, we see so much inequity in terms of providers, in terms of the wait list that folks have to deal with as families, as individual students. I think it's very critical that we start there. I also commend the senator's work on making sure that no child is in the classroom hungry. We know the impact of not having a breakfast, on those early periods of the day. All those pieces are so transformative. And then when we look at the formulas that are constructed that distribute funding, I think taking into account decades of outcomes that haven't been what we wanted, and also mapping on at the federal level all of the critical needs that we have in this country to create the building blocks of what careers might be, whether they're going to college or going straight into the workforce, and thinking about our education system as not just only part of our economic engine, but what kind of country are we building for the long term? So the way you level the playing field is you look at your town that is more well-to-do, and you say, well, that they have the fundamental advantages of seeing through what those opportunities might be, baking into the formulas, the creation of opportunity, both for the workforce, but also the types of communities that we want to build. And I do truly believe that at the intergovernmental level, at the heights of government, getting our massive cabinet agencies aligned in a comprehensive strategy is how you get that done.
Well, thank you to both all for you for being here and asking these questions. Education again, it's many issues that education need to be, before we fix education, we need to fix some issues. Children going hungry to school, not going to learn. Children who living in the car with the parents, it's not going to learn. Then for us to fix education, we have to fix health, we have to fix housing, we have to fix lunch, we have to fix all those components for children to be safe and learn. Because if you are hungry, you're not going to learn anything. If you're not healthy, you're not going to learn either. Then there's so many issues. Before school started in my district, I visit every school in my district. And to see the building, they need safe and clean building for children to learn. You go to the school full of mold, how children going to learn in this condition, how we need to invest in our building, we need to invest in education. But before we do that, we need to invest in housing, we need to invest in health, because if you have asthma, you're not going to be able, you miss many days of school. Then all those together, then we can focus, because the children are healthy, the children have a proper housing, the children have a mental health guideline. If they have those things, you will see how education will be grown, you will see how children will learn, and you will see how we fix our education problem. Thank you. And as a Congress, I promise you that I work for each of those issues to come to Rhode Island.
Thank you. There's a few things I would like to touch on this. The first one, as someone that was president of the Providence City Council, we work on passing 10 budgets for the city of Providence. I can tell you that one of the biggest challenges that we have is how we are putting too much of the burden to educate our children on communities that don't have the resources. The city of Providence has the largest school district, but the city of Providence also has about 40%, more than 40% of the land of the city of Providence doesn't pay taxes. Is that fair? So we have to make sure that there's funding coming from the federal government to make sure that we're not relying that much on the taxes of the local communities, especially communities that don't have the opportunity, the way to be able to tax enough to meet the needs of the education. Something else that I wanted to mention is, especially when it comes to the learning loss, one of the things that has proven that works the best is have tutorings available for the students to be able to catch up. I know right now some of the things that the governor is putting together with the different municipalities, trying to make sure that there is opportunity for the students to learn even when they are outside of the school hours. It's part of the things that we have to do. But at the end of the day, when someone, a rich person, if their kids are not doing well in school, they have the resources, and that's what they do. They will pay someone to help their children catch up in that subject. That opportunity should be available also for every other children.
So I agree we need to be massively increasing federal investment in our schools. And don't tell us that we don't have those resources, right? Not while we're cutting taxes on the wealthiest Americans, not while we're lowering the corporate income tax on the biggest corporations in this country to basically nothing, right? Not while we're continuing to increase the Pentagon's budget year in and year out, right? We have the resources. It's a question of, are we going to prioritize our young people? Having said that, as important as it is that we're fighting for more federal investment, I don't think we want to let the state off the hook either. As Senator Cano discussed, we have a state school funding formula that structurally, systematically, by design, underinvests in English language learners, in students with special needs, in our low-income students. And it is districts like Providence and others that are structurally burdened by that. Again, that's a state issue. I know the state legislators here have fought for improvements in the school funding formula. I think that it's useful to think about the role that our next congressperson can play on state level policy. I think traditionally there's sometimes been a sense that the federal delegation just should focus on federal issues and leave state issues alone. But,
30 seconds.
Whoever of us is elected, we're going to be 1 out of 435 in Congress. I think any of us is going to be able to have an impact there, but there are problems. Here, it's a big platform, whoever's in Congress, and being willing to use that platform to put pressure on General Assembly leadership to really campaign on these issues for state change. Also, really quick, just want to say we need to have laws requiring a certain level of social workers per student, and we need to provide the resources for schools to do that, because that is such an important issue that there is vast inequalities between schools around.
Thank you to all the candidates, and most importantly, thank you to all the panelists who asked amazing questions. So now we will move into the debate element of our evening. Want to go over some basic rules. All the candidates have been briefed on it, but for the audience, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer this question that I will pose. If a candidate is mentioned by another candidate, that candidate will have 30 seconds to respond. All of the candidates in the campaigns have been notified to keep their remarks to policy-centric solutions. And so let us begin. And oh, by the way, any of these questions can be answered. Raise your hand, and I'm assuming everybody will raise their hand, so I'll just make it simple. But my question is this: what unique qualities do you possess that set you apart from other candidates running in this race? Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. I spoke a little bit about this earlier. I believe that the state of Rhode Island have not sent a person of color to Congress. The state of Rhode Island have not sent a Democratic woman to Congress. The state of Rhode Island has not sent a working person to Congress that comes from the neighborhoods, right? I think it's about time that we send that person to the state of Rhode Island. And plus, I have the experience of being in elected office in the Providence City Council for the past, for more than 10 years, and I've been also serving at the statewide as lieutenant governor. I have been able to get things done in my community. Those of you that know me since the beginning in Olneyville, Silver Lakes neighborhood, Valley neighborhood of Providence, you can go and see the difference that has happened in those communities since I was serving there. I know how to work to get things done. I understand the challenges that when you get elected at the beginning, you think you can change everything right away, and then you go there and you realize that you have to work in collaboration with the people that are in the building to get things done. So I have the experience. I worked when I was in the city council, passed 10 budgets, passing with 10 budgets already. I have the experience working for affordable housing and housing at all income levels since I was at the local government. So I believe that makes me a qualified person to run and to bring someone that has worked in the jewelry factories like many Rhode Islanders that came here to this country without knowing the language, learning English, and also serving my community qualifies me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody any takers? Yes.
Thanks. So yeah, I would break it down into 2 things: leadership and experience. So first of all, I actually teach leadership, and I developed a leadership theory that I've used in a number of different corporations, as well as educational institutions, as being a leadership teacher. But more than teach it, I also practice it. As a first responder, I'm an EMT in my hometown. And in addition to that, as a business leader, where I've led divisions of companies, I've been CEOs of companies, and I've led a number of different organizations over the years, including not-for-profits, and including one that did a lot of work in trying to teach social and emotional learning and critical thinking skills in Rwanda. So the leadership bucket, I think, is an important one. It's also experience. So I've had a much longer career than some of the folks on this stage. When I first got out of law school, I actually worked in Congress and worked in the House of Representatives instead of running for Congress. And so that was, at that age, I thought that was a more appropriate thing for me to do, and I got great experience doing it and learned how the House of Representatives really works, so that I think I could hit the ground running on day one and really be effective as a legislator down there. I've worked in law, and I've represented indigent criminal defendants, I've represented startup companies, I've represented lots of folks that underscores the need for effective legislation. I know how to write legislation and how to implement it effectively. I've worked in education as a professor for many years at Williams College and now at Yale Law School, and I've worked in business. And so that whole panoply of experience, I think, is something that's unique to my candidacy here. And the interesting thing about the working in business part is it gives you the ability to work and bring accountability to the private sector. Right now, we've seen a whole string of incidents in this state where our state government has failed to work effectively with the private sector, whether it's Tidewater or the Princeton Street Armory or any number of other things like Revolution Wind No. 2, where contracts have fallen apart. And that shows that you need somebody in office who actually knows how to work effectively with folks in the private sector.
Senator Kano.
Thank you. Let's talk about leadership and experience. I am very proud to be from the community and for the community. And tonight, we talk about a lot of issues. And tonight, I have the pleasure to say to all of you that all of those issues I have championed at the state legislature. I'm gonna say what I did. Investments in Rhode Island with the care economy, access to capital in small businesses. I've been the champion to increase MBE and WDE at the state level, and not only that, I have called accountability to the governor many times to make sure that there is access for minority business enterprises. I have been the champion of Child Care as Essential Act. I've been the champion of the Early Educator Act. I have done not only protections for Social Security and Medicare, but I passed cover all kids at the state level. I empower the BIPOC communities because are important for me, but also I have done work at the funding formula level as the chair of the education committee. Education is important for me because it's an equalizer. I think I talked to you about that before. Working families are really the people that I advocate for because Congressional District 1 residents really care about the issues that I care, that affect me every single day. Inflation, like childcare, the economy. I empower youth because I do believe that youth is our future. I'm a mom. I'm a working mom. My children deserve a planet that is healthy. And I have been a lead co-sponsor of the Act on Climate. So let's talk about those values. We need someone that have done the work and that have proven leadership in the state of Rhode Island, that listens to the community, is from the community and for the community, and it's going to take only one of us to make a difference for all of us, and I hope that you consider me for this election September 5th. Thank you.
Sure, that was beautifully said, and I just want to say, look, I appreciate the fact that we're all in this process. It is about democracy, and democracy is about choices. And I will say what differentiates me from the folks on this stage is, I've spent nearly the last decade as a teacher. When we talk about education, that is what I've done. I've been in classrooms. But the other piece is, it's all good and well to be a staffer, but I've also been a legislator. I've been the lead sponsor on so many critical pieces of legislation at the local level, and I've also worked with my colleagues up at the state level, putting bottom-up pressure on behalf of the largest municipality in the state. I like to remind people that the ward that I represent is bigger than 13 smaller cities and towns. It's the fastest growing ward in the city of Providence, but also in the state of Rhode Island. When we think about the boxes that my colleague Matos mentioned here, I'm a working person, I'm a teacher, I'm a person of color, I've got experience as a legislator, and I think the other important piece that I want to highlight for folks today is that I'm not self-funding my candidacy. And that's important, because if we want real representation, remember, I grew up in Providence born and bred. I've been here my entire life giving back to my community. If we want people who are representative of real people, we have to send real people. We don't need any more saviors. We need people who are from the community, real people from the community. And I'll say that we've raised over $150,000, small grassroots contributions from all over the state. We are truly the grassroots campaign. And I say that just to highlight that we are there with the people, and the people are supporting us. No outside Washington interest, special money. We are powered by the people, and we are for the people.
Senator Matos, you were mentioned. Would you like to respond?
Yes, my comment was about, was not referring to the people running for office, but I just want to say that, yes, that's exactly what I was saying earlier. I represent probably the same life that many other Rhode Islanders represent, which is working families, first, second generation immigrants, many of them that work in the jewelry factory, that went to school, went to Rhode Island College, and now I'm able to serve my community. Thank you.
Stephanie.
So to the question about unique qualities that separate me from other officials, I think a lot of the questions that have been posed has been about issues with childcare, education formula, and everyone's going to talk about their tenure of legislation. And if we're going to be honest, if it was working, then we wouldn't be here complaining about it, right? So I think that that's what separates me here. And I also want to say that if it were working, I honestly wouldn't be running for office. I would continue my job in tech because I would be able to afford childcare. I would not have to worry about my mom not being able to afford to retire because all the elected officials would be actually doing their jobs, and I wouldn't be here advocating because I don't feel like it is getting done. So that is where I'm at. When we talk about leadership and experience, I can talk about the equipment that I built for the Department of Defense. I can talk about the teams that I've managed. I can talk about the KPIs and hitting hard metrics. I can talk about the millions of dollars that I've done for big companies and being able to leverage that experience and take startups to the next level. I can speak on that, but what is more important to me is the fact that the system hasn't been working for us. It hasn't been working not just for black and brown, and yes, I'm a black and brown, but also for the poor people in Woonsocket who are also white. They have been struggling as well.
Yes.
And if we're being even more honest about these endorsements and how they work, the education formula was actually worked on by Secretary Moray. A lot of the endorsements that these candidates receive are just high fives as friends to continue this poverty problem. So let's be honest about the bills that are being passed and the work that's being done. Everyone sits here to collect another job, and it is a political promotion for them. I'm not interested in leaving my job at the White House for another salary upgrade. I am interested in actually working to make sure it's efficient. I'm not promoting anyone else's platform. I am concerned because it hasn't worked for me. It's not working for my mom. It's not working for my neighbors. It's not working for the people in Woonsocket, not in Newport, and not in Providence here. So that is
all. About time somebody keep the butt around here.
So I respect Stephanie a lot, and we've been working together very well. But I would like to say that representation does matter. And it takes people of color to be in elected positions to make the difference and the change. If you don't have a seat at the table, then nothing is going to change from one day to the other. So the things that I have been able to move in my capacity is because I'm able to build coalitions, talk to people, bring my passion and my lived experiences to state legislation. And it's going to take time, let's be real. So as a legislator has been from every level of policy, I would say that it takes a legislator to understand when you are there, that it takes building coalitions without compromising your values to make sure that you make the work for the community and for the community. Because without my voice, things are not moving the right way. So please, let's make sure that we recognize that.
Yes, and I'd also like to affirm that. Being an elected official is a very, very hard job. The sacrifices that I've made personally, it is tough. And with all due respect, I'll say when you're in the throes of it, you know what it's like.
15 seconds.
And I just want to share for the 15 seconds that I have. I have been a fierce advocate on behalf of my constituents. I've sent over 3 million emails to my constituents. We have the fastest growing ward in the district, the state, and also in the city. We are spurring important issues that really make a difference for people's lives, and it's all about putting people first, and that's exactly what we're going to do should we be elected to Congress. People first, and people over politics too, so thank you for sharing that.
Senator Quesada. Please refrain from comments. Thank you.
Well, one of the things that I have to say, if we want to send somebody to Washington, what difference I make from them is many, many things. I'm not a yes person. I make leadership uncomfortable when I don't agree with them. And some of us over here, they yes, because now they have all the support from them. But another thing is, I do what I said I'm going to do. I'm somebody who worked hard, who represent my district, I had experience. I found many legislations since I've been in the Senate from day one. And I went to Gina Raimundo, I remember when she was elected the second time, and I made her to put judges of color in Rhode Island to represent the community that we are, because we are not all the same color, and we have a very diversity community, and I think the court needs to represent the community that we represent. And because of that, we have 5 judges, African American, 1 Asian, and 2 Latino today sitting in court. And that was because I sit down with her and I said, if you don't do that, I would not support you. I called everybody in that who was in the Latino Black Caucus, and I made sure that everybody pledged with me to make sure that we had judges of color. We need somebody who's going to be a strong voice. We need somebody who's not going to be over there to benefit themselves. We need somebody who's going to fight for you, who was a working family, who went from a factory, who was a welfare mom, who know what you're dealing with every day, who lost her house because of non-payment. That's me, who I went through many of the things that you went through your life. And that person, then I ask you, September 5th, vote for Ana Quesada for Congress, and I will fight for you.
Thank you. I think I was referencing a few of the questions in the responses, but let me say this. I dedicated my life to service because my story is one that's similar to a lot of people here. I don't think it's super unique that my dad was born in Ghana, my mom in Liberia, and of all the places they could meet, they met here in Rhode Island. And you can go to 452 Hartford Avenue right now, see my dad working a register. You can see my mom recovering from her second knee replacement surgery. For me, the desire to be in government as a staff person was one where I thought I could contribute to the conversations, contribute to the dialogue, contribute to the outcomes, and be there to serve. And so I think any criticism of that desire is something that, is something for you to assess. But I'll tell you this, in that job as a staff person, I have helped communities across this country, including communities here in Rhode Island. When you've seen a mass shooting happening in Highland Park, in Buffalo, I went and picked up the phone, called the mayor and said, how can I help you? How can I help your community heal? Marshaling federal resources with leaders across the country. When extreme weather has hit, hurricanes, big storms, I have been on the ground to help people. So if that is something, worthy of criticism, again, I question that, but there is no intention here in my candidacy other than to serve and serve a community that has done so much for me and so much for my family.
10 seconds.
To be clear, being a staffer is not worthy of criticism, so if that was misconstrued by anyone, that is not the case. But I would say being on the ground is a very different experience.
What are you teaching again?
Please restrain from comment.
Yeah.
Well, you shouldn't be teaching.
As a teacher, I had to live with the experience every day of going into a classroom and teaching my kids about active shooter drills instead of teaching them about multiplication and division. That's why I'm in this fight. We need people who are going to stand up to the gun lobby. We need people who are going to hold Big Pharma accountable. We need people who are going to hold Big Oil accountable. And that is why so many of us, I believe, are in this fight and fighting for the things that we all believe in. So I just want to affirm that and thank everyone for this critical discussion tonight, all my colleagues.
I'm going to allow Aaron for the first time tonight. Thank you.
I'm an organizer. That's always been my approach to winning change. How do we bring communities together to build collective power and coalitions, to take on entrenched interests and win? And that's been how I've seen that real change is possible, including a lot of fights where many people didn't think it was going to be. I remember when I was first elected to the General Assembly, so many people said we'd never pass paid sick days. There were too many corporations, too many conservative lawmakers lined up against it. But we organized. You know, we brought workers and small businesses and unions together. We knocked on doors. I organized with my legislative colleagues, folks I agreed with, and some folks that I didn't always agree with. But you know, you build relationships, you find points of commonality where you can move forward together. And we figured out how to get it done. So the 100,000 Rhode Islanders who couldn't before could start caring for a loved one or recovering from an illness without having to worry about losing their pay. That was the same approach to, I remember when I was a rep doing a tour of the Department of Corrections and starting a correspondence with some folks who were incarcerated there, and then reaching out and saying, we need you to start doing something about solitary confinement in our prisons. And I was a little apprehensive about that because looked around, didn't seem like there was much resources or capacity or funding to build a coalition that could take on the DOC and the corrections officers, very powerful interests. But folks kept saying, we need you to start this fight. And so we introduced that legislation. We started organizing. We started sharing folks' stories.
30 seconds.
And when it didn't pass, we did a study commission that led to a report, which was then cited heavily in litigation, challenging the unconstitutionality of solitary confinement, which worked. Just last month, there was a consent decree ending long-term solitary confinement in our state based on a judicial opinion that also heavily cited that report. So again, I've seen that change is possible, but it takes us coming together and organizing and taking on tough fights and entrenched interests, but we can do it.
Thank you. Don, 30 seconds, please. Thank you.
Just a quick reflection. I don't see this as a fight, this campaign. I see this as progress, as a group of people with good intentions getting together to try to do something useful. I also don't see a lot of the world as a fight. Now, there are some things worth fighting for. Reproductive freedom, I think, is one of them. Individual rights is another one. The right to a decent education is another one. And then there are a lot of things that are worth collaborating for and working together to get more funding for education in the state for the people who need it and to equalize funding across districts and to work together with the private sector to build the institutions we need to fight climate change. We're not going to sue our way out of that problem. We're going to build our way out of it.
Thank you. With that being said, we will go to closing statements. We'll start off with our right. Aaron, go ahead. Closing statements.
Well, again, I want to thank BLM or PAC for the incredible work that you do, standing up for criminal justice reform, for police accountability. Thank you for being a voice for the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, which desperately needs to go. Thank you to the Rhode Island Black Business Association, all of the incredible panelists for bringing us together, and again, for the work that you do. You know, I've got a 2-year-old. That's why I'm in this race. You know, I spend a lot of time worrying about the kind of world he's going to grow up in. You know, is he going to be, our kids going to be safe at school from guns and mass shootings? Are they going to have clean air to breathe and a livable future? They going to have a functioning democracy by the time they're old enough to vote? But when I'm up late at night worrying about these dangers, it's not just fear that I feel. I mean, I'm furious because none of that is an accident, right? It is not an accident that more kids die from guns in this country than anywhere else on the planet, right? It's not an accident that our climate is spiraling out of control. It's not an accident that so many working people are struggling right now while corporate profits are literally hitting record highs. You know, the gun industry, fossil fuel companies, corporate CEOs, and the Republican allies are creating and feeding these crises because they're making billions and billions of dollars off of them. But again, I also have hope. As furious as that makes me, I've seen that when Rhode Islanders come together, there's not a lot that we can't do.
30 seconds.
We've won change, we've taken on entrenched interests, and I think on so many of the fights that we care about, whether it's ending the school-to-prison pipeline, whether it's supporting small businesses, whether it's fighting for an education system that actually works for all of our young people, whether it's taking on the gun industry to stop these terrible tragedies. You know, we need leaders who can organize and bring people together and have a record of winning real progressive policy change. And that's the work I've been doing here in Rhode Island for many years. That's the kind of work I'd be so honored to be able to contribute to in Congress with and alongside organizers and leaders and activists like all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and I want to once again ask for your support in this election to be elected to Congress, to represent Rhode Island in Congress. There's a lot of things that we spoke about today. There's a lot of things being talked about out there. At the end of the day, when you're making the decision, think about this. It's not about any one of us here. It is about people that say that we can look at her and tell her, yes, in this country you can do anything you want. There's not a limit for you. There's not a limit that you cannot run for Congress. There cannot be a limit that a person of color and a woman can be elected to be the congressperson from Rhode Island. It's not about any one of us here. It is about what it takes to be able to run a campaign and to be able to finally send representation to Congress from Rhode Island. It is about sending someone that's going to fight for people like my parents that are in fixed income, relying on Social Security and Medicare, and worry if they're going to have enough to pay for their medication, to pay for their food,
30
and
seconds.
to be able, maybe, to be able to, when the ice cream truck drives by and the grandkids are at home, buy them an ice cream. That's the reality that people are going through right now
10 seconds.
here in Rhode Island. And I'm running for Congress because we have to make sure that when my daughter tells me that one day she wants to be president of this country, I can look at her eyes and says, yes, you can do it.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
Not enough, people are going to stop telling you
5
that
seconds.
you're not enough.
Thank
Because that's what we hear all the time.
Senator?
Thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you to everyone to be here tonight. But I want to ask a couple of questions, and please, if you feel comfortable raising your hands, please do it. How many in this room love a loved one on gun violence? How many in this room being on private and on welfare? How many in this room lose their home because of non-payments? How many in this room have to go hungry because sometimes they didn't have enough to give food to their children? Then I'm going to say one thing to you. You need to send somebody to Congress who understands the issue that we're talking today. We need to send, I'm running to Congress because you need to send somebody who's going to represent you, who know what it is to be in your shoes, who is a working family, who went from the welfare office to the state office, somebody who knows what we go through every single day. And that person is the time that the Rhode Island sent a woman of color to Congress, and that person is me. I want to say to you, I will fight for you. I will do everything when I get to Congress to represent you in the way that you will see. Because it's one way, I'm tired of people coming to our community just when they need our vote, but then you don't see them again. I'm tired of people coming and use us when they need us. But then when they have to respond to our need, they're not there and nowhere to be found. How many of you have a family member who can give you $125,000 to be able to send How many of you have paid $600,000 from their personal account to be able to run for office? That's what you have to look. September 6th, vote for Senator Quesada for Congress.
Thank you to all the organizers for the opportunity. I'm so grateful to sit here, and I'm also thankful to the other people running. I know sometimes it gets contentious, but democracy is sometimes messy, and we know that, but we also know that it is worth fighting for. It's worth fighting for because we all have our stories that anchor us in doing this. For me, I often talk about my mom studying for the citizenship test. And I think about it because it is formative for me. It's one of the reasons that I'm doing this. You know, I sat with her after her shifts, and we go back and forth on the questions to hear who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, or how many stars and stripes are there on the flag, or why did the Pilgrims come to this land. And for us, in this room, we all have our why. That's part of my why, is that their effort, and when I refer to my parents, their effort and their hard work got their son from Pawtucket to the Oval Office to sit with the President of the United States to brief on the important issues of the day and find solutions. And I think that's missing in a lot of our politics. And that's why we're all assembled here. We need a government that's solutions-oriented. We need elected leadership that is focused on solving problems. We need leadership that is representative. And that's why I'm running, because I know I can provide that from day one, and I'd be honored, truly honored to have your support. But thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you along the trail.
My name is Sandra Cano, and I'm running for Congress because I deeply care about helping people, and I always carry the voice of my community. I would say that my lived experiences have shaped my values and my vision as a policymaker. I witnessed gun violence myself. In Colombia, my dad got kidnapped. I came to this country as an immigrant, and I have lived racial justice and cultural divisiveness, and I have lived under the cloud of bias. I'm a mom, I'm an immigrant, I'm my parents' daughter, and I'm doing this because their sacrifices need to pay off. They taught me that I need to say thank you to this country, to public service, and also for my kids, because they deserve a better future. I'm here just to represent all of you because I'm from the community and for the community. I hope that I will be your choice of candidate because September 5th, you need to represent someone that understands the struggles of Congressional District 1. Also, I think that these are not talking points for me. These are my story. And I am able to be in the choice of everyone that have been able to express that it's important to have representation in Congress. We need high quality education, living wages for working families. The climate crisis is urgent. Access to health care, reproductive justice. The housing crisis is horrible every single day. Immigration reform. But this is the country that allowed me to have the American dream. And it's only possible to do change when you have the passion, commitment, and the advocacy that I have done at the state level and bring and carry that experience to the federal level. I hope you support me September 5th. Again, I'm Sandra Cano, and I hope you give me the opportunity to be your congresswoman and represent you at this federal level. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and I want to thank my fellow candidates for all of the robust discussion tonight. My name is John Gonsalves. I'm a two-term councilman, and I'm a teacher, and I'm running to put people first. There are so many people, as we mentioned, in Rhode Island who are struggling. And that is my story. You know, I grew up in poverty to a single-parent household. It was then Congressman Cicilline at the age of 12 who, again, helped me to get into a local middle school. And the rest is history. Your zip code shouldn't determine your destiny, and that's exactly the reason why I'm in this fight. I've been an effective legislator at the local level. I've solved thousands and thousands of constituent service issues, and I'm trying to bring that leadership to Washington, again, to put people first. I'm horrified by the things that we're experiencing in this country. The decisions that have been made by MAGA Republicans and also the Supreme Court is our lived experience. And I'm gonna fight tooth and nail to bring federal funding back to Rhode Island. I'm going to fight for economic opportunity and education in an equitable Rhode Island. I will fight for the most aggressive climate justice legislation, be it the Green New Deal or other important things that are going to put our climate and our people first. And I'm going to fight to hold special interests accountable, whether it be the big gun lobby, big pharma, and also the special interests that operate around gun violence. We have a multiracial, multi-generational coalition that we're putting together. And I hope that I can ultimately earn your support. Please visit our website at johngforcongress.com and join us in this fight. Thank you all for being here.
My name is Don Carlson, and I'm running to be your representative in Congress because I love this state, and I love the quirky, wonderful, independent-minded, diverse people of this state. We've talked about a lot of important issues tonight. I'm really glad that we drilled down on education because I think it is the most important issue. It's the foundation for everything else, to bring up our children with the right life skills and the critical thinking skills and the love of lifelong learning to prepare them to be good citizens and good employees, good workers, good leaders. That's a wonderful thing that we've done. We haven't talked about some issues that are also critically important. Things like mass incarceration, gun safety, police accountability, climate change, which is something that I'm deeply passionate about. Come back to that in a minute. And with all due respect to my colleagues on the stage up here, I think I am part of this community. I was born here. Only three of us, I think, were born here. I grew up here. I grew up over at Dunkin' Donuts, for goodness sake. My grandfather was a firefighter his whole life. And, you know, I'm a fourth-generation Rhode Islander. My family has been in this state through thick and thin, through good times and bad for 4 generations. So I do think I'm a part of this community. I also think that David Cicilline did a pretty darn good job representing all the parts of this community, black, brown, everybody else. And as a proud gay man, like David, I think I can do equally well as your advocate in Congress. So I don't take second place to anybody about being able to serve you well in Congress. Finally, in terms of my background, I'm an educator. That's where I light up. When I get in front of a classroom, that's where I'm in flow. I'm a teacher at heart, and I really do believe in education. And most important of all, I think, for the future of this state, I want to lead this state in climate change and the fight against climate change. I want to build sustainable businesses that create great jobs for good union workers with apprenticeships. That issue of the wind energy business and all the sustainable businesses that we can build around it can be the new economic engine that powers the future of Rhode Island, and I'm proud to lead it.
First of all, thank you for your due diligence in putting together this amazing event. And thank you for everyone for attending, being a part of the conversation. There was someone else who ran for office, and when he wanted to run for office, they told him, 1, he was inexperienced, 2, he didn't have enough money, and 3, it wasn't his turn. That person and I share the same birthday, actually. It's Barack Obama. They told him it wasn't his turn. They told him he didn't have the resources, and it was Hillary's turn. It's my time.
Come on now.
If things were working, I want us to be honest with ourselves. Rhode Island has been a democratic state. We wouldn't have these issues. And so when we talk about going to Washington to go fight the Republicans, who are we fighting here in Rhode Island, and why hasn't it worked here for us? Exactly. Because it's lip service. When people talk about how they've organized, what they've done is they've created systems and tools that later on they can use to their benefit. And then they get to sit at the top to make those decisions and dictate to us how they will help us. It is our time to have a seat at the table. And if they won't allow us to sit at the table, I will bring the table myself and my folding chairs. I want to add
30
to
seconds.
a conversation with us, democracy is sometimes messy. No, I think democracy needs to be honest. And I want to thank Senator Quesada for being honest today about what's going on. It's not messy, it's being honest. When power plants were being put in Providence to pollute our communities, when we're talking about clean air, we had staffers on that team as the face of those campaigns in our community, lying to us. And so I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I'm going to Congress to work for you because it's been broken in Rhode Island and it hasn't worked for us. So please go to beautyforri.com. And today is my birthday. I'm asking everyone to make a campaign for me for my birthday. And let's get on the debate stage because these fellas know they can't take me one-on-one. So let's make sure everyone hears it on the debate stage.
Thank you so much and happy birthday. That being said, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you to the candidates. Thank you to the panelists. That's the last time I'm going to be. Thank you.
Folks, stick around. We're going to try and get a couple candidates to come down and give us a chat. Stephanie, please.
Why I'm supporting you? For being honest. For fight for the people. I'm not your brother. And that's why I'm supporting you. I believe in your work. Ethic.
Folks, thank you so much for attending today. The time now
You
is
can watch us on our channel.
You'd like us out of here at 8 p.m. sharp, so these conversations out the hall, down the stairwell, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much, folks, for attending tonight.
Media.
I don't
So how do we stop the Da Vinci Center eviction?
What's that?
He just said there's a protest Monday morning.
I'm live right now. Give me a couple minutes. We'll connect. All right.
I'm heading out. All right. See you then.
So just over the road.
Perfect job.
How are you? Hi.
We're live. Let's say hi.
Hello, live. Thank you so much.
We're trying.
Hi. Good to see you.
Probably the best. I don't want to say that there's something
Yeah, so we for let's just do it. Let's do it. Oh, Snob, there we go.
How you doing? By the way, catch up with me. How you doing?
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah. You know what? I'll tell you. I'll tell you that. Monday night, right? Monday night. All right. Yeah. Are we going to be able to answer the questions? I got questions.
Well, yeah, we do have questions.
All right.
They've been listening a lot of time.
No, I know you have questions. We can open it up a little bit for questions.
We don't have time.
I'll bet you my questions are harder than your questions.
We got some good ones.
Oh, I'm
familiar with your feedback.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. But I'll see you on let's catch up with this.
Nice to see you. How are you? Thanks for coming. How are you? The ending, how's this debate gonna go? I didn't know how to do Quick, Pat, like 5 minutes.
Yep. Harrison Tuttle's here with us. BLM PAC Rhode Island. Congratulations on it. Come a little closer because you got to use your outside voice. Congratulations. This thing was lit tonight. There were focus on policy, but there were clearly raw emotions on display. People were held to task politely, I think in a very positive manner. The setting's beautiful, Providence Public Library. The tech was great. Congratulations to your organization for throwing quite a party here. What's your reaction?
Well, I'm just happy that it went well, because being up there as a moderator, just trying to make sure that everything goes well. But
great clock management, as they would say in the NFL.
Yeah, well, I'm just really happy that the candidates here were able to answer their questions and provide a platform, because that was ultimately the goal. And most importantly, to everybody that was here today, they really provided some great energy.
Was this open to all the candidates?
This wasn't. So this was open to the top 8 candidates based off polling, based off what we felt like we could quite honestly fit on that stage, and it was quite tight. So
All right, super. I mean, is the PAC going to come out with an endorsement?
Not at this time. We won't be endorsing, but we're definitely hopeful that these candidates fight for some of the issues that we care about. And based off some of these answers, I think there's a lot of candidates that will do that.
Great. Congratulations. Thanks. Thank you. Hang in there, folks. I think we're going to get either Mr. Amo or Mr. Carlson.
Hello, folks. Again, just a gentle reminder, the library would like us out of here at 8 p.m. It is 7:45. We really appreciate you all coming to the debate, but we need to let the library get ready for tomorrow morning. So please, if you can make your way to the exit, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I don't want to violate the bill, but if you head out or around this.
Thank you. The lighting wasn't great.
Mr. Carlson is going to join us momentarily. We're about to see if this is a trend. Events at libraries, they really like to close on time. Good, we're live still. I'm going to try and get.
Need a PAC member?
What's that?
Need a PAC member?
I got Harrison.
Okay, good.
I'd love to get Sandra Kane out and see if we can, Senator! Senator! Ms. Cano! 2 minutes.
To exit the library. 10 minutes. I'll be like, please have these conversations outside of the library. Thank you.
Come a little closer, and of course, outside voice.
Okay.
All right, so we've got Stephanie Beauty. Did I get it right this time? Beauty?
Beauty, you did it. Yes.
That should be easy.
Like Beauty and the Beast.
Okay. Well, tonight you were Beauty and the Beast. Because quite frankly, in the last couple of forums that we've had, they've been very well run, lots of great questions, but there was an intensity tonight, a display of raw emotions that we haven't seen in this entire campaign. But just explain again your point, which someone yelled from the audience. I think the words they yelled were mic drop, when you talk about the notion that it isn't working. It's a incredible salient point. So just elaborate on that.
So Rhode Island has been a Democratic-controlled state for quite some time.
So it's not a fight of bipartisanship. And so when we talk about going to DC and working for folks or fighting for folks, as a lot of the candidates are trying to portray, we haven't been working here in our democratic held state. And so it isn't working because the same people are giving us lip service. And so in order to change that, we actually don't need to send more politicians to DC. That's part of the problem. It hasn't been working for us here in Rhode Island, and it's not going to work for us in the next 5, 10, 20 years. We've heard a lot of the issues that folks have shared from the panel, and that has been something that has been a long-standing issue. COVID exacerbated it, but it was there beforehand, if we're going to be honest. And I think that that's what I'm really trying to talk about here. And my message to Rhode Island is that we deserve honest candidates. We deserve someone that's going to be truly working for us. And that is what I'm really striving to do. It's to work for not just the low class, but also the marginally disenfranchised and the middle class. So that way we are not struggling and continuing to hear the things that are not working in DC, when in fact it hasn't been working for us here in Rhode Island.
10 minutes. We have 10 minutes. Please exit the auditorium.
Let me just yell this. At the coalition, we don't usually handicap elections. We don't talk about the race. But tonight, only the 8 top candidates were asked to this forum. You're one of them. Now, that's probably not surprising to you, but I think a number of Rhode Islanders have now watched you as one of the emerging candidacies rising up, if you will. Starting out, you're relatively new to Rhode Island politics. You've got a strong resume, but do you think you're catching fire here? You think people are resonating and really reacting to your message?
When I talk to people in the community, we relate because we're in the same boat and we understand the problems. Now, to get that on the main stage, that is the issue. And so I'm asking people to come out, support, please donate to the campaign so that way we can have these conversations out on the main stage. So please come out and vote, but the way for us to do that, we need to get that to the main stage. So please donate, beautyforri.com.
All right, and last point, you're going to be joining us in the next few days to have a conversation about foreign policy. Looking forward to that.
Very excited.
Because that's, even tonight, now I know there's going to be a great forum Monday night, but foreign policy questions have been largely absent from the conversation.
So excited. Well, they want us to wrap it up, so I want to be mindful. But yes, I will be happy to participate in that discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, and we will see you soon.
Sounds good.